Yeah, very good afternoon to everyone. So I think we can start for our session now. Right, so I'm very excited to be here this afternoon. Thanks for AUS ISS for inviting me. Okay, so my topic for today will be on healthcare. Right, so I will be sharing insight on how we in HIS are practicing architecture. I will also sharing insight on how and what actually we are doing, particularly during this pandemic time. Okay. All right. So before I start, let me introduce myself. My name is David Lim. I am an assistant director from the enterprise architecture team, or in short, EA team, in Chief Architect Office at IHIS. So what we do in the EA team, we actually make architecture patterns. We also develop implementation standards, design guidelines, technology roadmaps, in line with our IHIS policies, right? And we also actually guiding our project delivery team, right, in implementing their healthcare systems. Okay, so for me myself, at the moment, my focus is actually on the cloud technologies. So I'm working closely with our cloud platform engineering team at IHIS. Okay, so I'm helping them in setting up our healthcare commercial cloud. And I'm also assisting a number of our entities, which is from the healthcare cluster, in embarking in a cloud journey with us. Right. So, as a cloud champion in IHIS, my day-to-day job actually I'm looking closely at cloud native services and also tools that we can leverage, particularly from the cloud service providers. I'm also looking and working closely or engage our cloud service providers and the principles, right? Particularly for the deep dive design discussions. And I'm also motivating our internal IHIS team in developing their cloud competencies. So in fact, yesterday, right, actually I got a sessions with some of my fellow architects in Chief Architect Office, where actually I share with them what are the strategy or the tips for them to prepare and to ace their cloud certification exams. Right, so in addition to that, as you can see here, in this slide, I'm also an adjunct lecturer at NUS ISS. So I co-teach one of the class, which is architecting software solutions. Okay, and as you can see as well, I have multi-cloud certifications in AWS, in Google Cloud, and also in Azure. So that's about me. All right. All right. So next, what I want to do is I want to introduce you to IHIS, right? I know some of you, you may heard about IHIS, but you may not know actually what exactly we are doing, right? So this slide gives you pretty much quite comprehensive information about what IHIS is, about what we are doing. All right, so as you can see here, first of all, IHIS, right? We are actually IT service provider for MOS entities like public healthcare institution in Singapore. We also the health tech agency for MOH. Okay, you might heard about GovTech, right? So is it something? Is it the same with IHIS? So I will say that we are kind of similar to a certain extent to GovTech, but our focus is different. In IHIS, our focus is on the healthcare system for the Singapore. Right? All right. So in terms of the mission, we actually aim for digitizing, connecting, and also analyzing the Singapore health ecosystems. We are looking closely for the past 14 years. If you know about our history, we actually formed in year of 2008, where the IT department staff from the various healthcare cluster come together to form one IHIS. Right. We have been serving and supporting more than 2 million of consumer of our digital apps. We also have been serving more than 40 of public healthcare institutions and agencies in Singapore, and including also the Health Ministry and State Board. Okay, and then from our partner ecosystems, so far, right, we also working closely with them. We have been supporting them. We have more than 1,500 non-public healthcare providers that we have been supporting. Things like community hospitals, nursing homes, GP clinics, and also the major private healthcare groups, right? In addition to that, we're also working closely with the research institutions and with other ministry and state board. Okay, so if you want to know about us, right, how much staff strength that we have. Currently, we have more than 3,000 professionals. Later on, I will share you more details about that. In fact, we are now close to 4,000. We have been also managing, developing, and operating more than 700 systems, right, for all the healthcare services in Singapore. And saying that we actually have kind of comprehensive end-to-end activities. So as you can see here, we have a team that focuses on the IT policy and governance. We also have a team on specific focus on cyber defense, IT planning developments, system operations, data analytics, AI, and architecture standard, and etc. So it's kind of an end-to-end suite of capabilities that we have here. All right, so as I mentioned before, right, we manage, operate, and develop more than 700 systems. So you may ask me what are kind of systems that we have. So this slide actually provides you with kind of a brief overview of the various kind of systems that we have been supporting so far for Singapore healthcare landscape. Right? You can see here from the left, top left corner here, we got health analytics. This is where we have systems like Brain, system like EDW that provide the analytics platform for our users, right, for our data scientists. We also have systems on the mobile apps, which is more for consumer, which is for Singapore populations. I think some of you may use it before. If you know, we have a mobile app called Health Hub, right? If you go to the Play Store, you can download this Health Hub, and then from there, you can actually view your vaccination or your test, COVID test result. Okay. We also have systems for the care delivery, like our GP Connect, for the community care, for the virtual reality, telehealth, medical imaging, monitoring, inpatients, RFID, health financings. Another one that we have here is our for care continuity, right? So we are actually managing the electronic health record systems for all the patients in Singapore. And we also have system in laboratory for the laboratory information systems, pharmacy, inpatient, and all of patients, operating theater, and also we have a number of systems under trial and developments like our AI chatbot. So this chart provides you with all these various systems that we have been maintaining and operating so far. All right, so now how about our team of professional or our workforce here? Okay, so as I mentioned before, we have more than 3,000 professionals, and our professionals those are people, they are not only have the technology of engineering competencies, but they also are people that have the healthcare or clinical domain knowledge, right? So if you ask me what kind of role that we have in IHIS, right? You can actually just think about any role that I believe we all have here, right? So here you can see that we have software engineer, right? We have also a network engineer. We got cyber security engineer. If you're talking about AI or data science, we also have data engineer and data scientists. And we have architects, right? Later on, actually, I will share to you how our architect office is actually organized. We have enterprise architect, we got solution architects, we have UI UX engineer, we got cloud engineer, we have software tester, and we also have people that are actually looking at the policy. So it's quite a wide range of role that we have at IHIS. All right, and this is the slide that show you so far the award that we have receiving. We have more than 150 awards in recognition of our excellence in the application of technology within the healthcare and human capital practice, right? So the most recent award that we just received is on the award from the SES Tech Leaders Award. This is for our GP Connect system, which is used for the vaccine operations in Singapore. And we also have the Public Sector Transformation Award, in where we actually win in the category of Agility Award. We also have the award that we received from SES in the category of Enterprise Architecture Award, right? Okay, so I won't go to explain one by one here, but you can see that these are all the awards that we have receiving so far. All right, so that's about IHIS, right? Now I will come to the main content of my presentation or sharing for today about us, about Chief Architect Office, about how we are practicing architecture in IHIS. So I'll be saying to you about how we are organized in guiding enterprise IT at the portfolio and solution level. Okay, so if you may ask me, right, about Chief Architect Office and how are we organized. So this slide provides you with that information. You can see here in the Chief Architect Office, we actually have 3 teams. The first team that I want to mention is the Enterprise Architecture team. This is the team that I belong to, where in this team, as I mentioned, right, we are actually making the standards, the guidelines, the patterns, so that our project delivery teams will be guided, right? So when they do the project, they can actually revert back or follow these standard and patterns that we have. So in the EA team, we are actually looking at the architecture at the enterprise level. We are also providing the review, the technical review in all the projects that our healthcare cluster is embarking on. So that is enterprise architecture, right? And then the second thing that we have here is our solution architecture team, right? So you need to understand the difference between enterprise architecture and solution architecture. In the EA, we are looking at the enterprise level, okay? But in solution architecture team, our focus is at the project level. That's why here you can see that we have project at the national level, which is our national program. We also have project at the cluster level. If you know in Singapore, right? If you are familiar with our healthcare cluster, we actually have 3 healthcare clusters. The first one is SingHealth, second is NUSS, and the third one is NSG. So we have project at the cluster level that our solution architect will support. We also have project at the system level, meaning at the entity level. Okay, so this is where our solution architecture team will be mostly involved with. And the third team that I also want to mention here, which is also crucial and important for us, is our standard and data quality team. This is a team where they actually are looking at the standard. They are looking to define the standardization for the data, right? Because we're talking about the healthcare system, data is important. Healthcare data, clinical information are very important. And this team actually in charge for making sure that this clinical data or informations can be exchanged between multiple healthcare systems, right? There are various healthcare systems where the data need to be exchanged. And this is where our standard and data quality team is in charge for. And as you can see here, we have our clinical informatics group. So they are the staff that are actually supported from this group. Okay, so that is our Chief Architect Office at IHIS. So in addition to that, if you look at this slide here, we also have a National Chief Architect Office, which is at the MOH level. This is the team that sitting at the MOH. They are actually looking for the overall governance and guidance, right, to all the IT healthcare project that we have. Okay, so that's about Chief Architect Office. Okay, so next, what I want to share with you is what we do, what are our deliverables, and what is actually our day-to-day job, right? If you ask me, I would say that we have 4 main activities that we do day-to-day. The first one, as what you can see here, is envision. Second activity is planning. Third one is the architecture and standard, which is the standard and guidelines. And then the last one is on the architecture viewpoints and governance. So what are these activities? I will actually have a subsequent slide that go into the details. But for now, let me try to give you just a brief information about this, right? So we start with the envision, right? Envision is very important because during the envision stage, this is the activity where we actually have the opportunities to communicate with our stakeholders where we actually sit down with them, we actually try to understand the current state of the business capabilities, and we try to actually map it, right? So this is where we are looking at the roadmap, right? We are looking at the IT master plan. So that is envision. And then the second one that we are actually looking here is planning, right? After we have envisioning activity, we need to do more detailed planning. This is where we have things like, there are two domains basically, the business domain and also the technical domain. So in the business domain, we actually looking at something called a GSA or goal state architecture, where we look at from the business point of view, right? So you see here some example like the EMR, our electronic medical record. We also have laboratories and supply chain here. So that is planning. And from the technical domains, what we have here is CRM. We also have commercial cloud, and we also have facial recognitions. So recently, actually, one of our architects, he is actually developing, right, the goal state architecture for facial recognitions. All right, and then let me move on to the next one, which is the standard and guidelines. This is where we are looking at the standard. The standard that we are looking is also at the application level and also at the infrastructure level, right? So when we look at the standard here, the most important thing that we need to see whether there are things that can be set up as a common services, right? And we also look at the not only the application infra, but also at the components like the network and also the platforms. Okay, and as I mentioned before, another standard that's very important for us is data standard. This is where we are looking at clinical and non-clinical data and information. So things like the drug dictionary, things like patient demographic data are the data standard that our team is looking at. And the last activity that we do is on architecture viewpoint and governance, right? So after we have the envisioning, we got the planning, we also have the standard and guidelines, then our architect will be involved in the project, right? There are projects at the various capabilities that we have here at the bottom. This is where we have our solution architect. They will be involved to provide the architecture viewpoints. Basically, there are architecture diagrams, right? And the governance, right? To make sure that the project, the solution that they are going to implement, we align with our standard and policies. Okay, so this is summary about what we do and our deliverable. Okay, let me now try to go into more detail here on those 4 activities. I start with the first one, which is on envision and plan, right? So in the envision and plan, right, this is very important. And as I mentioned before, we are actually talking to our stakeholder. And during this phase, what we do is we are looking at the business capabilities. So we are using a capability model to try to see, to assess what is the current state of the business, what are the capabilities that the business can do. And we also looking at our IT landscape. So what we do basically, we are actually mapping our IT landscape with our business capability, right? So this is where we actually come up with something called a master IT master plan, right? Where we have the target business architecture, we have our IT landscape, and we identify the opportunities that we can do, right? So this is envision. And the second activity that also important for us is planning, right? And I mentioned earlier in planning, basically we are looking at GSA. So GSA is a goal state architecture. You can see here, we are looking at GSA, for example, here for the patient system of engagements. So you know, right, in the healthcare services, patient is very important, right? They need to be able to access our healthcare system effectively and easily. So the system of engagement for patient is the one that we are looking at. How to make sure when the patients communicate with us, they can actually do it in an efficient and effective way. All right, then we are also looking at the contact center GSA. This is another GSA that we have, which is part of our planning phase. Okay, so that's about envision and plan. Now, the next activity that I want to explain to you more is about our standard and guidelines. In the standard and guidelines here, this is where enterprise architects are mainly involved. We are looking at providing the right setting of systems and components in our enterprise infrastructure. Okay, so there are many standards or many patterns guidelines that we have been developing so far. You can see from the list here, maybe it's a bit small from the back, but if I can pick some of them. So we are looking at the standard, let's say for our hybrid identity architecture. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, one of the systems that we are actually embarking at the moment is our healthcare commercial cloud. So for healthcare commercial cloud, we are looking at how we can enable the hybrid identity, right? This is where our patterns for hybrid identity come into play. And then we also have another patterns, which is for application integrations. So we are talking about the cloud environments. It's not just about sitting in the commercial cloud, right? But also we need to understand how the application hosted in the commercial cloud will be able to talk to the application which is sitting in our on-prem data center. This is where hybrid applications or application integration in hybrid cloud is important. So we have patterns for that. And we also have patterns for other things, right? We also have standard, let's say for how our privileged access management will need to be implemented. We have design guidelines, let's say for file exchange transfer and etc. So this is the standard, this is the guidelines, and this is all that we have been doing from our Enterprise Architect Office. Okay, so the next one that I want to talk about here is the architecture viewpoints and governance. So you already learned about envision, right? Which is where we actually working with the stakeholders, and then from there you have learned about planning, and then after planning we actually have the standard and guidance, and then after that the next activity that we do, particularly this activity led by our solution architect, is the architecture viewpoints and governance. Okay, so in this activity, right, our solution architect, they are working closely with our project team. They are actually helping them and they are guiding them. So they are helping them to come up with the architecture diagrams. We have logical architecture, we got a physical architecture, we got the context diagram, and also we have data architecture. So this is the architecture that produced, right, in this activity. Okay, so another important aspect that the team also or the architect need to help or guide the project team in how about the system that are going to be implemented. Because most of the time, the healthcare system that we have, they are actually accessed not only by our citizens, by the public, right, by the population of Singapore, but some of these systems also can be accessed by our partner. Right? So we have partners like the researchers, universities, they want to access our systems. Okay, so we also have a system that have to be accessed by our internal staff. So all these access method will actually be managed and be planned properly. Okay, so I've been talking much about the activity, what we do and what are our deliverables in Chief Architect Office. So this slide is expanding further, right? So from all these activities that we do, actually what is our goal, right? What we want to achieve, okay? So we are helping with the modernization of the enabler and infrastructure layer, okay? And if you can see at this diagram here, this is a kind of a high-level tech stack that we have for healthcare. And here you can see that basically the principle behind this, we have the multiple layers of the tech and solution stacks. Okay. At the top here, if I can point here using my laser pointer, this is the group of users, right? we got public, we got partners, we got public partners, we got patients, we get care partners, we also have research partner and employee staff. So how this group of users will actually access our system? This is through what we call a system of engagements, or in short SOE. And underneath the SOE are the various business capability that we actually provided. I think I mentioned earlier, we got capabilities in terms of patients, managing the patients, managing the care that the patient receive, let's say in the hospitals, in terms of the system operation and so on. And at the bottom here is very important. This is where our application enablers sit. Right? So what we have, or what we actually set up here is, with this enabler, right? The goal is to make sure that we have any new system that will be onboarded or will need to be implemented. Right? So the recommendation is for them to leverage the enabler that we already have. Okay, so the goal is to reduce the development time needed for these new applications and systems. Okay, so we have things like enterprise service bus, if you heard about it, and you also have things like API gateways. These are some of the examples of enablers for the application that we have in our environments. And lastly, at the bottom here, this is where our infrastructure sit. So as mentioned before, we got our healthcare, which is our on-prem data center, where we actually call it as a healthcare private cloud. We also have infrastructure sitting on the commercial cloud that we call as a healthcare commercial cloud. Okay, in this slide, actually talking about EA and SA, right? So they are enterprise architect, and we also have a solution architect. So how these two roles or two groups of architect is working? Okay, so you can know, you need to know that enterprise architect is the one that need to have the breadth of the knowledge, right? Because enterprise architect in charge at the architecture at the enterprise level. Okay, but we also know that the enterprise architect, although they also have the breadth of the knowledge, we also encourage them to have the depth of the knowledge. This is where, from time to time, some of our enterprise architects, for the professional development purpose, we encourage them to be involved in the project to get the depth of the knowledge. Okay. On the other hand, we have our solution architects. Solution architects, as I mentioned to you, they are the group of architects that involved in the projects, right? So they have the depth of the knowledge, but they may not have the breadth of the knowledge. So what we actually encourage them also, so that they can develop their professional career, is actually for them to gain the breadth of the knowledge by doing what? By helping to perhaps to perform some of the review of the various systems that we have in IHIS. Okay, so this is where we actually have to kind of supporting the professional development of our architects, right? In addition to balancing the workload. Okay, so because as I mentioned in my early slide, in IHIS we have more than 700 systems. Okay, so you can imagine how we have to manage all these systems. So we need to make sure that our architect will not be burned out. So we need to be able to balance the workload, right, among all the architects that we have. Okay, so another way for us to also to help our architect to develop their capabilities is through our coaching and mentoring. So in the Chief Architect Office, we have something called a CAO school, or Chief Architect School, where we actually conducted regular webinars for our architects, including also our project teams, to actually to give them or to teach them about our artifacts that we have been producing so far. So we have this sharing that we have done. Okay, and here I mentioned that each team has strong lead. So we have a lead which is leading our EA team. We also have another lead leading our solution architect team. Okay, so this is how we have the enterprise architect and solution architect and how they work hand in hand together. Okay, so that's about our EA and SA. Now, the third team that I mentioned earlier is about our data standard and data quality teams, right? Okay, so I think I mentioned earlier, right? These standard and data quality teams, they are in charge for the setting up the standardization for all the data. In Singapore, we actually is the representations for SNOMED. I'm not sure whether you heard about that. SNOMED basically is the international standard for all these clinical informations, right? So we are the one who are in charge for SNOMED standard in Singapore, where we actually use it for our Singapore Drug Dictionary, or SDD in short. So this is where our standard and data quality teams are in charge for. Okay, the next one that I want to share with you is more on our career pathway. Okay, so I'm not sure about your experience or your background, but if let's say you want to come into architecture world and you want to come to IHIS, this is our architecture and standard and data quality pathway. So let me highlight here that we do have an enterprise architecture team here. We also have our solution architecture team, right? I explained about these two teams earlier. And we have our data quality teams, which is the top right-hand corner there. So currently, the domain architecture and information architecture, we don't really have it, but we actually have planned for it. So this is where those architects who want to be more specific on the domain, like the infrastructure or more on the information, they can actually have the career pathway. Okay, so if you look at this, right, let's say you come and start as a solution architect. From here, the career pathway is to become a senior solution architect, and then from there is to become a principal solution architect, and then the final one is to be the chief architect, which is the one that handle our chief architect office. And as you notice here, there's a dotted line here. The meaning of this dotted line is for the lateral movement, meaning that the architect at each of this group here doesn't always need to go up here, but they can have the lateral movement. Right? I'll give you an example here. So our enterprise architect or our solution architect here, they can actually move between teams. This is actually also happen in us in our chief architect office, where we have an enterprise architect, and one day he actually feel that he want to go deeper in the project, then he actually transfer to become solution architect, and the other way around. So this is the pathway from the vertical perspective and also from the horizontal. Okay. Okay, so my next slide, which is this one here, is talking about the career roadmap. Okay, so this career roadmap developed using a Gartner toolkit, and we actually use it internally. So let me explain what is this roadmap here. Okay, so as I think I mentioned earlier that our IHIS workforce, which is more than 3,000 staff, more than 80% of them have both the engineering and technology competencies, but they also possess the clinical and healthcare domain knowledge, right? So to be an architect, right? So this is an example for EA, enterprise architect. So to be an architect or enterprise architect, you are not actually expected just to have the architecture or technical skills, but you need to have more than that, right? If you look at this table here, there are actually 14 competency of skills, right? So started from communication and presentation, and then project management, domain knowledge, architecture methods, modeling, and so on here. So as you can see here, as an enterprise architect, the person is expected to have level 3 in most of these competencies. So we have level 1, which is kind of a beginner or novice, level 2, which is higher, level 3, level 4, and the highest is level 5. So to be a good enterprise architect, at least the persons need to have competencies, which is mostly at level 3. Okay, so this is our career roadmap. And I think this is one of my last slide about my sharing on the insight on how we are practicing architecture in IHIS, right? So what we do, basically, we are very, very proud of our work and organizations, right? So if you come to work with IHIS as an architect or with any other role here, what we do actually making impact to people's life. So this is what the thing that we are proud of. So particularly during this 2 or 3 years of pandemic situations, we have many of our healthcare professionals, they are actually working and helping Singapore actually to handle this COVID pandemic, right? So we have systems that support our vaccine operations. We have systems that, as you can use previously, like Health Hub, where you can view your vaccination test record. So of course, in the architect or in the chief architect, we will have challenges ahead, right? Because technology is evolving, and we, in the architecture point of view, we also need to catch up with the rapid change of technology. Okay, so yeah, this is my slide. Actually, if you are thinking about perhaps working with us in the future, you can go to this website link. You can actually drop an email to us. Right? Later on, I also have my email address and my LinkedIn profile. If you want, you can also connect with me at LinkedIn. Okay, so I think I still have time here before I open for Q&A. So what I need your favor or your help to do is, I have 2 questions here, right? This is the first question that I want you to help to submit. If you can pull your mobile phone, you go to this website here. You can just type in pullev.com, and then you enter this David Lim 302, and then there is a question that which is this question. So, which industry are you working in, right? If you are still studying, you can just say that you are still studying. If you are working in other industry, you can fill in the other industry, right? How about we do it now? I will give you like 1 minute to do that. Okay, so that is the first questions that I have that I need your help to do the polling for us. And if I can move on now, I got the second one. So the second question is, does your organization face challenges in one or more of the following area? So A is enterprise architecture, B is solution architecture, C is software design, D is enterprise integration, and E is regulatory compliance. So I will activate the second questions so that you can also put your answer here. Okay, I think that's the two polling questions that we need your help to submit. And this is the survey for this session. If so, like the previous session, right? You can actually scan the QR code and then submit your survey here. So I will also give you 1 minute in order to do this. And while waiting for this, right, if any one of you here got questions, you can ask the questions. I will try to answer your questions. Anyone? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, maybe you can help to pass the mic. Yeah, sorry, there's a mic going to be passed to you.
There's a medical device monitoring. How can enterprise use this? And also for the mobile apps, can they store their data, medical records, through the mobile apps, to the cloud?
Okay, so your question is, if I can repeat, the first question is on the device monitoring, right?
Yes. And the other one is using mobile apps. Can private enterprise store medical records in the cloud?
Okay, so the second question is on storing the record in the cloud, is it? So if you are talking about the device monitoring, the solution that we have is usually used by our public healthcare institution in Singapore, right? So if you know, like public hospitals, polyclinics, they actually consider public healthcare institutions, where in IHIS we're actually managing the system for them. Right. So one of the systems that we have is the monitoring device. So we have monitoring device for patients, which is, let's say, within the wardroom, and we can monitor the patients. We also have things like RFID for the patients, right? So the patient, we have the RFID tag where you can actually monitor the patient movement. Those sort of kind of monitoring solutions for the patient. Okay, so your next question is on the data, right? So the data is, the data, whether is, I think your question is whether the data can be stored in the cloud, right? So we need to be aware that there are security-related data or the sensitive data, right? So these are the things that, according to our policy, we have the certain treatment where this data hosted in the cloud. What are the security protections, like the monitorings for the database activity that need to be actually be set up or configured over there. Okay. Okay, I think I saw another hand for another questions.
Yeah. Hi.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, David. Daikun here. So I'm relatively new to enterprise architecture, but I have a few questions. Maybe I'll just ask two.
Okay. Go ahead.
After that, I can ask you again. Okay. So I noted that there's this term called enterprise architecture, solution architecture, domain architecture, information architecture. What is the distinct difference between them? Between all these different architecture? And also the second question is that how do your enterprise architect work with the individual project team, I guess? Right. Do they provide the overarching architecture, or do they go down to the individual project to work with them?
Right. Okay. It's very good questions. Thanks for those two questions. So the first question is that there are 5 architecture, right? Or 5 architects that I showed earlier in my slide. Enterprise architect, solution architect, infra, I think a domain architecture, information architecture, and I think the data or standard quality team. So in IHIS, right, in our Chief Architect Office at the moment, we only have 3 of them. So we have EA, which is Enterprise Architect. So the Enterprise Architect are those architects that looking at the enterprise level. So they are more at looking at the overall patterns, the overall standards that need to be followed by all the projects. Then we have the Solution Architects. Solution architects are those who are actually assigned to the project. So they are helping the project teams in coming up, let's say, with the logical architecture, with the physical architecture, and so on. So those are the solution architect. And we also have the data and standard team, which is looking at the definition of all the standardization, all the data that we have. So we are planning for this domain architecture and information architecture, but this is at the moment is still in the progress. Okay, and your questions, the second one?
Yeah, the enterprise architect, how do they work with the solution architect or the project managers? No, in terms of whether they provide overall guidelines.
Yeah, so I think I have a slide here. If I can go back quickly to my slide. Yeah, this one here. Right? So enterprise architect and solution architect, they can work hand in hand. So enterprise architect, like what you mentioned, like, it's more like the overarching architecture, right? So it's setting up the standard for the whole enterprise, the patterns. Then solution architect, we actually will kind of following that standard that we have, following the pattern that we have, and then apply those pattern and standard in the individual projects. Right. So enterprise architect, most of them, they are not really involved in the project because they are working at the enterprise standard level. But as I mentioned earlier also, we also encourage our enterprise architect to go deep where they actually have the opportunities, right, to be involved in the project so that they can have another experience to enrich their professional development.
Because my question is that each individual systems or project, they have their own constraints or challenges. So I'm not sure at the enterprise level is a common pattern where they can use for, because they are talking about 700 system, definitely there are many different kinds of systems, whether is it an OT or an IT system. So they will require different solution, I would believe. So is there no enterprise that architecture that cover all 700, or do you group them according to the characteristics of each systems?
Oh, okay. So the standard that we have, right, that actually developed by our enterprise architect actually cover the wide range of the systems. So let me give you an example, right? Let's say we got this hybrid identity architecture patterns. So these patterns will apply to all the systems that will be hosted in the hybrid cloud, meaning the system component of the system will be, some component will be in our on-prem data center and another component will sit in our commercial cloud. So any system that have this setup where they need commercial cloud and also they will be hosted in on-prem data center, they can follow the hybrid identity architecture patterns. Right. So to answer your question, yes, the patterns, the standard, and the guidelines that we have will be applicable to all the systems that fit or meet the criteria for that.
Okay. Hey, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? I think I got 1 more minute before we end this session. Yeah, I don't think there's other questions. So I will end this session. Thank you very much for your attendance. If you need more information, or if you maybe in the future you think about IHIS, you want to come to work with us, you can reach out to us. This is my contact, my email address, and also my LinkedIn. So also feel free if you want to connect me through LinkedIn. I will be glad to accept your connections. Okay, thank you very much.